Let me get the official time for you here. Let's see. We've got 18 days and 3 hours. Well, technically 2 hours and 54 minutes until the inauguration of the next guy and the booting of the current guy. And it can't come soon enough. It just can't. And it's not necessarily just about like the policy and the politics. It's just about leadership, right? It's about awareness. And that has lacked for nearly 4 years now. And it was once again on display in the last 24 hours. It doesn't matter who you voted for. Doesn't matter what your political leanings are. You can't possibly believe that Joe Biden has done a good job leading this country, especially over the last 8 weeks, as we have been sitting in this awkward time of Donald Trump getting elected and Joe Biden being on his way out the door. All the issues that people have brought to the forefront about Joe Biden, not being in tune with what's going on, not being aware, frankly, not even being all that capable of doing the job from a mental capacity standpoint, have been on steroids. And that was once again the case over the last 24 hours. Now, I watched a little bit of what Joe Biden said last night, and he could barely read a 4-minute speech. Mark, I'm going to put this in the 8:05 block for you to just start rolling some of here. That way we can play some of this. I'm not going to play the whole 4 minutes. That would be torture to the audience. It really would not be fair. But I do think it's important to listen to a little bit of this. It is painful to listen to a mentally unfit Joe Biden slur and misread his words. And it's also an important reminder as we start 2025 that the entire media infrastructure supported this guy running again for 4 more years. And if he had won, they would still be calling it misinformation. They'd be calling it right-wing propaganda to suggest that this guy ain't there. And if you hear some of this from last night, it was about 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock our time. The lights are out on Joe Biden.
I know I can speak for all Americans when I say our hearts are with the people of New Orleans after the despicable attack that occurred in the early morning hours. To all the families of those who were killed, to all those who were injured, to all the people of New Orleans who are grieving today, I want you to know I grieve with you. Our nation grieves with you. We're going to stand with you as you mourn and as you heal in the weeks to come. I want to thank our brave first responders and law enforcement personnel who stopped the attacker in his tracks before he could kill or injure even more people. And I want to thank you to everyone at the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, including the FBI, for working nonstop to investigate this heinous act. The FBI is leading the investigation to determine what happened, why it happened, whether there was any continuing threat to public safety. Here's what we know so far. To me, the killer was an American citizen, born in Texas. He served in the United States Army on active duty for many years. He also served in the Army Reserve until a few years ago. The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill. The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby. The situation is very fluid, and the investigation has a preliminary stage. And the fact is that right now, there you go. The law enforcement and intelligence community are continuing to look for any connections.
This is too painful. This is like someone doing a bad impression of Joe Biden. The problem is that's him at Camp David last night. The guy's done. He's been done for a long time. Right before we left on Christmas break, there was that big piece in the Wall Street Journal that highlighted how the people around Joe Biden had been protecting him from this clear and obvious mental decline since literally the day he got in office. Since 2021, the Wall Street Journal reported that they were changing schedules, changing meeting times, moving things around to appease Joe Biden and basically figure out how to work around a guy who did not have the lights on. To put it politely, things were dimming very quickly on Joe Biden's mental fitness for office, and everybody around him knew it. And if you spent any time the last 4 years being like, I've just got two eyes and two ears, and, I know a little bit about the world, and I've been around people, and, I interact with normal human beings. This guy ain't all there. Oh, what's wrong? Oh, boy. Oh, that's missing. He's fine. He's sharper than he's ever been, said Morning Joe.
Well, many people have dealt with relatives in the same thing, so you can't fool them.
You can't fool them. You can't fool common sense Americans. And the media tried like hell to do it. We don't have an actual president. Joe Biden could barely read this 4-minute speech on these terrorist attacks or the terror attack in New Orleans. And while January 20th can't get here soon enough, the nation's in big danger right now. I'm not looking to put any fear in anybody, but, you saw what just happened in New Orleans. And I love the first thing he says, of course, about the guy. He eventually got to the ISIS influence, but he wanted to make clear that, hey, my border policies had nothing to do with this guy. Okay, that's technically true. But we still have major problems in this country, courtesy of your policies that put America last and put the American people last instead of putting them first.
Boy, that is the truth, because it's only because of who is coming in that there's any security, because if it were the other person...
Oh, my goodness. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Could you even imagine what we'd be dealing with right now?
Putin, China,
oh,
et cetera,
man.
They know what's coming, so we've moderated a little bit.
I think so. I absolutely think so there, John. And you know what needs to happen as well? And this is long overdue. We need to immediately do away with having 2.5 months between a presidential election and an inauguration.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
I mean, and it used to be longer. You go back to the days of Abe Lincoln. I think Abe had to wait like 4 months to get in office. It was even longer back then.
Well, you had to catch a covered wagon out of Westport.
Well,
to get there, right?
Yeah, I understand that's part of the deal.
A little bit of it.
But still, it used to be much longer. Now we're down to 2.5 months. But we've got to do away with this. I mean, the world is moving at light speed. It's ridiculous to still have an administration in office making decisions after losing in a landslide 2.5 months ago. I mean, 2 months ago right now, but will be 2.5 months come January 20th.
Get them out by Thanksgiving.
Get them out. The problem right now on to why you can't do that, though, is you've got California still counting votes for like a month after the damn election. I'm not kidding. I mean, seriously, California, go look back. They were counting votes after Thanksgiving. It's comical, but they were. This thing should be turned around before Christmas. There is no reason that Joe Biden or whoever the president is cannot hand off the keys to the next guy and say, you know what, come the new year, you're off and running. Like Trump should be in the White House today making decisions on behalf of the American people. Yet we still got to wait another 2.5 weeks for that to happen. And boy, that day cannot come soon enough. We're thinking about doing some type of inauguration event, some type of inauguration watch party. And if you want to be involved in that from a sponsorship perspective, just make sure you hit me up, pete.mundo@cumulus.com, because we have been thinking about it, but we would need the right location, the right sponsor who would want to be involved in something like that. So do reach out or just text the show and I'll get a hold of you, 913-408-7957. We will get to you as well. I mean, just tell me on the text line or on the phones as we're back here on Thursday, January 2nd, 2025 is off and running. Regardless of who the president is it time to shorten the 2.5 months between an election and an inauguration? I don't know how you couldn't be a fan of that at this point. Like, even if it's Trump leaving and someone coming in, let's say I don't really care for and didn't vote for, this is such an awkward time. And the world is moving too fast to have these, whatever it ends up being, 2.5 months, so 75 days between an election and when the next guy takes power. With all due respect, I don't know why you would wait until after the Eastern Orthodox Christmas date of Tuesday, June 7th, to do the inauguration. I mean, I've seen some wild ideas on the text line here. We were just talking about whether or not it's time to shorten the window between when a president gets elected and when they actually enter office. Right now, it's 2.5 months, and it used to be longer. And it would take an act of Congress to do this, and Congress can't really do much of anything. I mean, this should be a bipartisan thing because it doesn't benefit one party over the other, right? It has nothing to do with who wins elections. It's just like when somebody wins in early November, they should be in office at the latest by the new year. This isn't difficult. Like, Trump should be in the White House today. And if you want to put the shoe on the other foot, Biden should have been in the White House whatever, January 2nd of 2021. 2.5 months is a joke. And with the way the world is moving, you have this awkward 75-day window when no one's really in charge, especially with the setup right now where the guy who's technically the boss, who's technically the president, feels like he hasn't been in charge for a very long time. But, I mean, I've got a lot of different ideas here on the text line. Someone said, how about the day after the Eastern Orthodox Christmas of January 7th? With all due respect, I say this as somebody who is, Christian and was just at church for Christmas. I don't know why we'd wait that long and what the Eastern Orthodox Christmas holiday should have to do with any of this. It's about national security. It's about getting the country back to business from a federal government perspective, because you know and I know, nothing's really getting done. I know we got to have a transition, but the transition doesn't take 75 days. It shouldn't take 75 days. You win, you spend a few weeks, of course, figuring out, people you're going to put in place. Trump was announcing his nominees days after he won. Try to get it confirmed as quickly as you can, and then get to work in January. We're sitting here now with 2.5 weeks of basically nothing and nobody being in charge. 913-408-7957. It is great to be back on 95.7 FM KCMO. Thank you to a lot of the great fill-in hosts who did good work the last week and a half. Paul Gallant in Houston, John Whitmer in Wichita, and then Jonathan Weir and Patrick Toohey here in Kansas City. And Toohey texted me, he's on the show on a fairly regular basis with our friends over at the Show Me Institute. And I'm paraphrasing here, but his text was along the lines of, boy, I'm mentally exhausted from that. That was 4 hours. Jeez. Here's his text, and I don't think he would mind me reading this on the air. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I enjoyed it and learned a lot and found it mentally exhausting. Well, I guess when you do it every day, you don't really think about that. And I'm not saying we're digging ditches here. Listen, we have a lot of fun. The goal is to make the show sound like we do absolutely no preparation, when, trust me, there is a lot of preparation. Colin Cowherd, who is a sports talk host, said that very well. He said, I want to make the show sound like I roll out of bed and I just start talking, even though there have been hours of prep that goes into me sounding like I just rolled out of bed and started talking.
The aspect I think people take for granted or you don't realize, it's a lot like driving a car. You're looking out the window and you're paying attention to where you're going, but you're thinking ahead, how do I get there? I've got to turn up here. I've got to exit. Who's behind me? Guy in my blind spot. You've got those kinds of things going on where you're doing something, but also thinking in other directions.
And you're anticipating what might happen, what callers might say, what texters might say, who might rip you, who won't. There's a lot of that goes into it, John. You're looking in the rear view mirror, side view mirror, trying to plan everything out. No, you're right. That's a good way to put it. Did you use that with Toohey the other day? Did you give him that example?
I tried to help him. I said, buddy, it's like driving a car. I use that for people when you go into a different studio.
Yes.
It's like getting into someone else's car. Let me sort out the wipers from the turn signals here, and then I'll go.
That is a reason I don't like doing it in other places. I mean, I will, do shows on remote, obviously, Back to Blue Tours, different places we'll do the show from. I'll spend a few days maybe in the summer doing shows from other places, but I don't like doing it because you're not in your routine.
Yeah, the board that we have is kind of like the dashboard on a car. You get in somebody's car, different make or what have you, and you're like, wait a minute. Okay, hang on here. Once we have to start thinking about what we're doing, it's when we screw up.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. That's a very good way to put it. This is John Kennedy. I want to play some of the Louisiana senator and what he alluded to about the attack in New Orleans when he said, we know a lot more than we can share right now. Here's what he had to say.
We know a lot more than what's being reported, Aisha, but they are in the middle of an active investigation, and I don't want to do anything to screw it up.
Okay.
But I'm also not going to let them take the pressure off.
That's courtesy of Fox News last night. I'm not going to let them take the pressure off. We know a lot more. Now, that commentary from John Kennedy on Fox last night came hours after someone with the FBI. I mean, this is just amazing. Let's just play the first couple of seconds of Aletha Duncan, FBI assistant. This was at 7 a.m. yesterday, insisting that this wasn't terrorism.
This is not a terrorist event.
Stop! Stop! The minute I woke up, I turned on the news yesterday. The whole world knew this was terrorism. I mean, by the definition of terrorism, you drive a vehicle into a crowd of people with the intent to kill. That's terrorism. That is the definition of terrorism. And you want to know why the FBI continues to lose credibility by the minute? It's because they put people like this on television. And if the FBI came out and said, listen, we screwed up, Aletha Duncan should not have said what she said. She was put in a tough spot hours after the tragedy happened. It's clearly a terrorist event. Instead, they basically are going to act like it never happened, and she never made those comments. When the whole world was watching, and the whole world knew right away it was a terrorist event. Boy, do these agencies need to be cleaned the heck up. And it can't come soon enough. And it's sad to say, but there's not a lot of confidence in these agencies doing the job and being fully transparent with the American people.